Do older adults actually like technology? Let me explain. More and more technologies for older adults are coming into the market, from smart homes and ambient monitoring systems like Zemplee, to telehealth appointments, to digital games and virtual reality. Innovation in aging is accelerating, but a crucial question remains on the table. Do older adults truly experience these technologies as empowering? Or are these technologies quietly altering their identities, their autonomy, and the feeling of being at home in peace? Today's conversation sits at the intersection of gerontology, design, and the future of age technology. This is AI powered caregiving, and I'm Ashanya Antapur from Zemplee, where we actually do think deeply about how technology can support aging in place with dignity. I'm a product manager designing solutions for caregivers and older adults in the home alike. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Julie Brown, gerontologist, professor, AgeTech researcher, and one of the leading voices exploring how older adults actually integrate digital technology into everyday life. Dr. Julie Brown is an associate professor of gerontology at Ohio University and the coordinator of the university's Aging and Gerontology program. She's also a leading researcher with many publications to her name on aging in place, digital technology use among older adults, age-inclusive design, and more. Welcome, Dr. Brown.
Thank you so much for having me. It's delightful to be here with you today.
I'm really excited to dive into our conversation, but I think the first question that would be top of mind for most people listening is, could you briefly tell us what exactly is gerontology?
Well, simply put, gerontology is the study of older adulthood. Folks don't just arrive, say at age 75. They have an entire lifetime of experiences behind them that shape their aging experience. And gerontology is such a huge area. It's like saying, I have a degree in science. Well, what kind of science? Is it biology? Is it physics? Gerontology is similar in that it very much focuses on the aging experience, but are you looking at policy? Are you looking at aging in place? Are you looking at, say, aspects related to dementia, person's neurons? So it's incredibly broad. And AgeTech is one of those pieces underneath that big umbrella. And as a side note, geriatrics is a part of gerontology, where geriatrics is what people tend to hear about, and that's looking at the medical disease side of gerontology. And again, I'm looking at aging in place and technology and how it's shaping the aging experience.
Okay, wow. Well, how did you get interested in gerontology? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a PhD in the subject as well. And what aspects of it are you really looking at?
Well, just a quick backstory of how I even got into this. I used to be a high school guidance counselor, actually, many, many years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I've always wanted to do something related to older adults. I didn't know what. And this is back in the day before Google was even a thing. Okay. So it's not like I can just go online and do any kind of search. And at one point, early 2000s, I just started to volunteer at an assisted living facility, helping out with activities, whether it's painting nails or crafts or whatever. And it was around 2006, the activity director came in. She said, I have this new game I'd love for you to set up for our residents, but I know nothing about it. But she brought in the Nintendo Wii. That was a game
Wow. Okay.
changer. I hooked that thing up and the residents went wild for it, right? And I started watching their engagement with this, new form of technology, the conversations, the reminiscence, how some of them regarded it as, a form of exercise. I'm like, there's something really interesting happening here. And even though that really wasn't a developed field, gerontechnology, was more heard of in parts of Western Europe at that time, but I decided to pursue my PhD with focusing, of course, gerontology, but looking at how technology is really starting to become more integrated into our lives and how that is, could be helping or hindering, quality of life for older adults.
It's so fascinating. I mean, I could just imagine something like the Wii being a huge hit, even from my days playing Wii
Hmm.
as a kid.
Oh, for sure.
I'm really interested because your work explores like digital games and virtual environments for older adults. Do you feel like playing those games or being in those virtual environments kind of affects their brain training in any way?
That's $1 million question, and there's been a lot of research in that area. But to back up on that really quickly, I've done oodles and oodles, like 90 some interviews with older adult gamers. And there's more out there. Like, even when I started my research, there were more older persons playing digital games than younger persons, believe it or not. And that's where I was on the cusp
Really?
of, yeah. So when I started my research, that was absolutely the case, because that's when you started having like the handheld games and such. And, ask them, well, why do you play? What is your motivation? And none of them, not a single older gamer said, it's because I want to help, myself cognitively as I age. That wasn't a thing. They're doing it because it's fun. That's the thing that we tend to not think about with older persons. At least in the United States, aging tends to be viewed from a medical lens,
Yeah.
and it's something. Aging is something to fix. Or no, it's something to be celebrated. It's something, a time for persons to, be engaged in technology. Has the potential in different tools of technology to promote engagement, to promote fun, to be immersed in a person's background so they can continue doing the things they want to do. So even if it's not actively being used for engagement, socialization, but something to support their life, however they want to lead their life independently.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point that older adults need to have fun. They deserve to have fun. In fact, they have a
Yeah,
lot of time to have fun.
yeah. And the
um,
money, not everybody, of course, but there's more disposable income with that population than with the other populations. And technology is not this big, scary thing for most older adults, like other folks tend to think it is. There's a lot of older adults who absolutely embrace technology.
that's really interesting to think about. In your research, where do you work mostly with populations that are kind of in like cities or suburban or more rural? I'm curious about that.
Sure. Well, I've done both. And right now I'm at Ohio University, Southeast Ohio in the Appalachian region. And this is a very rural area. So that really comes into play when it comes to technologies that rely upon, say, internet connectivity in rural areas where there isn't a lot of infrastructure in place to support that, or a lot of resources for, let's just say I have neighbors who have the capacity, or there is connectivity available for them, but they may not be able to afford whatever it may be. And the opposite is true, where a person can afford whatever technologies and they want to, but the internet connectivity is not there, or they have to spend a whole lot of extra to get something out to where they are. And I have been looking at how this is shaping the rural aging experience. What if from those who can connect in whatever way, if that's required, versus those who may have more accessibility elsewhere. So yeah, I think it's important to consider those kinds of aspects when looking at the older adult consumer in this kind of lens.
Yeah, of course I ask because we work with older adults in different areas. But I do feel like people in rural areas might are a little less receptive to things like ambient home monitoring or ambient sensing, or having, their smart speaker talk to them.
Hmm.
And totally understand. I think the hesitation is valid. It's like you're not maybe as exposed or maybe as interested.
Hmm.
But then I think you bring up a great point that, technology is all around us, and there must be a lot of gamers. People watch TV. Everyone has a smartphone already, right? Most people. Um, and so I think that, it's really a aspect of getting them comfortable and understanding what's happening in the home with sensing or with any new technology.
Hmm.
Um, and positioning it from a lens of fun seems to be a great way to go about it. So,
Sure. Yeah. So whether it's through the lens of fun or something to promote engagement, but especially when the product is set up, like I said, it's immersed in the background to help them, be better situated to continue doing whatever it is. So, like I said, they may not be using that technology for fun, but it's there to support them so they can continue doing whatever it is that enhances their quality of life.
Continue to have fun, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As speaking about enhancing quality of life, um, what's your opinion on do digital games in older adults? What role are they playing with social connection and healthy aging?
Yeah. This is a fun one, and I'll try my best to not get carried away because I get excited about this aspect.
Please
I have
do.
I have an entire 200-page dissertation on it if you want to read it. But I found with my older adult gamers that I interviewed, a lot of them will play for purposes of reminiscence. Like, for example, one of the women I interviewed with, she just said, I used to play baseball, growing up with my dad, and we played baseball, whatever. And now she plays baseball types of digital games.
Oh,
So it's a kind of way for her to kind of connect for her. Others will, some of at the time, the middle-aged gamers I interviewed who are now older adults, because we have to look at it from a long-term standpoint. This one fascinated me where these middle-aged adults who are now older adults, they were children during the time of the space race wars and stuff, where, folks were trying to land on the moon, and you have movies about Martians and stuff like that. And so a lot of those things that they engaged with in their childhood, they're really interested in those digital games, or they've been playing, I should say, these games all their life, some form of alien space types of vibe to it, or those older adults who in their youth really enjoyed playing something with dolls or something. Well, they're playing the Sims stuff now.
oh yeah.
Or they're playing those games that really helps to connect with their friends or loved ones, like some type of Scrabble type of game or Match Four, or what it's where it's a back and forth. So it's a way of connecting with whether it's their adult child or grandkid or just their buddy, where they can connect and drop each other messages and connect throughout the day. And that can be helpful potentially for a caregiver if they're on the receiving end of that, knowing that mom
Mm.
connected with me because I saw her make the next move on whatever it might be. Instead of talking about ailments, instead of talking about, did you take your medicine? Those conversations can get kind of, redundant or even annoying for some older adults. Well, it's like, no, I'd rather do this because this is more fun.
Totally, totally. But that's really interesting that there's both the aspect of the social connection externally, with the older adult connecting to the broader community. But then I love what you said about reminiscence. And I think memory training, recalling things from your
Mm-hmm.
youth is so important in older adults, right? I think it's healthy for your own life to
Mm-hmm.
just think on the past, but I know that it is also linked to like brain training, quote unquote,
Yes.
where you're doing memory recall. So that's
Yes.
amazing. That's so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the point of like, yeah, if you have an older adult that's a gamer and you have a young child around, or, an adolescent around that's a gamer, they can connect over that.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
beautiful.
I've had, a number of grandparents share with me, for example, that they have whatever gaming system in their home. So when their grandkid comes over, they can play together. And they said, so it's not the game that is what they enjoy so much. It's the tool to connect and have fun with their grandkid and have those really core memories that grandchild's going to have. Like, I remember playing, whatever it may be, with grandma or grandpa, or
Yeah.
auntie, whoever, right? So yeah, so it's a tool for connection, not really in that the tool, the game in itself is really the focus. It's that those memory making activities.
Yeah. And I mean, I think what we're going to see going forward is like pretty much everyone, from Gen X and down, it has some connection to digital gaming or virtual
Mm-hmm.
reality. So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like this research is really poised to set the tone for how gaming and aging in the home is viewed going forward, because everyone's going to be
Mm-hmm.
a gamer by the
Mm-hmm.
time I'm 60 or 70 or
Mm-hmm.
80 for sure.
Sure.
Um, which leads me to my next question. But as AI and ambient home monitoring systems become more embedded in homes, in society, more understood, What are some ethical tensions innovators should be paying attention to?
Whew, there's a lot, right? Um, One of the things that, of course, is, to what extent does the adult feel like they have, say in the matter? To what
Mm,
extent do they feel as if, for example, there may be an adult caregiver in their life, whether it is, an adult child, or if they're at a residential area, do they feel like, well, no, I don't want this. I don't need this. Where it's better, when it can be integrated into their life. And so it's something that is trusted. There's also the ethical issues related to privacy, and that is huge. For example, I've encouraged my mom to use certain technologies because she's had a few falls, and she's like, well, no, I don't want to use that because I don't want the government seeing, and I don't want
yeah,
Facebook seeing, and those are real concerns because, there is that fear, among a lot of folks. And especially when you hear about, older adults getting scammed on this and that, and they receive an email message. Well, it looks like it's from Amazon, but it's not, that kind of stuff. And
yeah.
especially if they've already had that kind of scare, there's a hesitancy and like, so what are they spying on me? Are they listening to me? So there needs to be a lot of clarity and a lot of transparency along those lines. Where on the other end of it, I have my mother-in-law who uses, say, an Apple Watch, and she's had falls as well. And that kind of product has, even before those happened, it was integrated into her life earlier on. So it's not an intrusion. It's not introduced when a crisis happens. Um,
Mm.
so those are the kind of the big issues that I would encourage folks to think about is the transparency for the older adult to understand this is what's happening to my information that may get out there, who has access to it. Maybe there are things that I don't want my loved ones or anybody being aware of. Yeah, and just really them feeling like they have a say in it being incorporated into their life.
That makes, I mean, that's makes a lot of sense to me. Obviously, nobody really wants, especially their private health information being circulated around, and we all want some sense of independence and control.
Hmm.
Um, but I think what you're saying brings up a really interesting point, and I know you recently posted about this, which is that people who are innovating in the space should be very mindful of the perspective of the older adults when designing these solutions. Could you speak a little bit about that? Have you seen that most age tech companies do take this into account, or is there sort of a lack and you think there's space for improvement in that regard?
There's always room for improvement. The age tech space, I've been sharing with folks of late. My impression, it's become a bit of the Wild West, right? It's like folks are and innovators are really starting to grasp, oh, wait a minute, we're having this huge population, in this stage of life in older
Yeah.
adulthood and aging into older adulthood. And there's tremendous opportunity, and there is a lot of good intentions, really honorable intentions, and some not so honorable, right? And those who really do their homework learned that you need persons from multiple expertise coming together and speaking, but who's more of an expert about older adults than older adults? And involving them in the conversations early on. And there is no one older adult to represent everybody's perspective, right? So it's really engaging, a variety of older adults, especially the ones who, they may see as like, say, a target consumer in this. Having those folks represented and, for example, if I would have AI in my home, what would my concerns be? What would be the things that would make me cautious about it, or under what circumstances would not, all of those questions are going along. But the earlier that the aging perspective, ideally from older adults as well as persons, such as myself, gerontologists, who focus specifically in this and trying to understand the aging perspective, the earlier that can be incorporated heavily, I think, where there's evidence shown that the better it's going to be receptive later down the line, the fewer iterations that you would have to do. I'm definitely seeing that going on.
Yeah, I feel like that's just good product design, or
Hmm.
product design is to involve your target market in the design of something, in the ideation, because they're really going to give you the ideas, the customer. For example, I'm product manager at Zemplee, and um, what's been really helpful for me is getting to connect with actual the end patients of our product, which is
Hmm.
like in uh, passive remote monitoring system, and we also do a smart speaker integration. We're focused on monitoring behavior and vitals in the home and keeping people in their homes longer or in their places of residence longer. And yeah, I have three of our older adults on, I call it speed dial, but it's really, I can call them on my Alexa and talk to them. And what I've learned is, even though I've been in the space for 3, 4 years, they always have something valuable to offer to the conversation. They'll always surprise me by saying, "Oh, I'm comfortable with this. Um, I'd be comfortable with this. She'd be comfortable with this. They'd be comfortable with this. And this is what I wouldn't be comfortable with." So I
Hmm.
think it's really worthwhile to, just have those conversations and reach out, have a few people on your network if you're trying to be an innovator or designer in the age tech space. Mm.
Yeah, that's crucial, and I am so glad that Zemplee has made a point of doing that. The due diligence, because you have multiple consumers in this, right? So it's not just the older adult. I appreciate that you mentioned the end consumer, but you have the caregivers. Whether it's the informal, such as family members or community friends or whoever, and the formal caregivers, like if it's in residential communities, something along those lines. So yeah, so there's multiple consumers in this, but especially involving, well, who's that end consumer there? And getting their input on things. And that's why audience studies research, that's, if you want to give it a name for what I focus on, it's the audience studies. What is their input on this all throughout the entire development of a product or service?
Audience studies. Okay, I like that. I like that. We also call it user studies.
Yes, yes.
User studies, but
Hmm.
yeah. I have a few more questions. I feel like we could talk for so long about this, but I
Sure.
do have one question that I'm interested in is, do you think the gamification of health is going to take off in the market of older adults? Um,
I keep waiting for that to happen. It's been talked about in my circles for years now. Easily like the past 20 years, with gamification, and gamification has come in so many different pipelines into our lives, right? And when it comes to health, I see it scratching the surface, but I've not yet seen it really become embedded, to the extent that I think some circles would want to see that happen. And who knows? I also wonder to what extent, for example, my generation, I'm Gen X, I'm right behind the baby boomers, right? So we have been going through our adult lives where gamification becomes a little bit more, not really in our face, but we're more used to it because experience with something really can speak to how much something could be adopted later on. And we see that
mhm.
currently with older adults. So I am curious to see whether, Gen X and then the millennials, because we may be more used to gamification being incorporated in our lives in some way, and as we start to becoming more aware of how the potential gamification of a product could prompt us to improve our health in some way, whether it's to help delay maybe dementia or something along those lines. And
Right.
related to that, I will say that when I, interview middle-aged adults, dementia is the thing that came up where they said, I am more likely to play a game or engage with some type of technology. It doesn't have to be a game if I think that it may stave the potential for, some type of dementia or some type of cognitive decline. It was those middle-aged adults, not older adults. So again, that could be more of where the marketing or the messages were being more made more apparent maybe to that population at the time, and currently even compared to today's older adults.
Yeah, I can see. So it hasn't really taken off fully just yet, but we'll keep our eyes peeled for what comes up in the future in regards to that. So, are you a gamer yourself?
No, not really. I play a really mean Mario Kart. I will say that. That's how my husband and I have, settled disputes. I'm like, okay, let's take it to Mario Kart and decide, that kind of thing. So
Oh
that's
my
just a
God.
fun way, to deal with, whatever. But I was an Atari kid when I was little and just never got into the Nintendo because it just was never within the home. So that has to do with things that we talked about with experience as well as access. And that contributes to motivation. And I have found, like, even when I introduced Nintendo Wii to the residents, where I was volunteering many, many years ago, 20 years ago, I wasn't even a gamer then, and I never played with them. I was there to help monitor and make sure everything was okay. Um, so I really enjoy watching. I just really the behavior and the conversations that come from. So I guess it's more of the scientist in me that
Yeah.
the ethnography of it, just sitting back and observing and being in the environment. So I truly enjoy watch people playing. But like I said, Mario Kart, I'll challenge anybody on that any time of the day.
Oh man, I want to play a game. My Mario Kart skills are pretty rusty, but yeah, I remember that was the
Mm,
one game I liked growing up.
mm,
Uh, Not a huge gamer myself, but like we talked about, I think gamification is in our lives already so much that
mm,
we're all kind of gamers.
yeah.
So, what books or pieces of media are you consuming or reading that you can recommend? Could be age tech related, could be totally for fun or whatnot.
Sure, sure. Well, the one I'm currently reading, and I've read it easily maybe 20 times, Longevity Economy, Joe Coughlin.
Ooh,
So if anybody who is interested in the world of age tech may not be very familiar, particularly the first half of the book. And I say I'm reading it because I use it for my business of aging course, where I teach my students in the gerontology program, when it comes to the business side of aging, whether it's looking at companies and how they market to older adult consumers or the caregivers, to what messages are they sending out, to how something could be designed better, to what extent do they are they aware of the invisible aspects, so to speak? Because, so innovators may look at, data or design, but are they recognizing the real lived experiences, the frustrations, or the guilt that a caregiver may carry around with trying to do whatever, and how they really try to understand the rich context that goes along with and those histories that go along with developing that product. So the longevity economy, I think, is an excellent start. And amazing stuff coming out of the Age Lab there at MIT. Another book that I read, on the regular because I use it for class. I don't read a lot of, I guess, all of those books are pleasure for me just because I love the area. But let's see, Atul Gawande's book has is really amazing when it touches upon caregiving, and I use that for class as well. And Atul is also from Athens, Ohio. He grew up here. So Atul, if you're ever listening to this, connect with your fellow Athenian here. But yeah, I use the book every semester for that course as well.
and that's Being Mortal.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't say the name of the book. Being Mortal. It's pretty great. And I have older adults who are paired with my students in class, and they read the book along with the students and get their perspective on it as well, because that really opens it up for a richer discussion. Again, it's just another case of, where folks tend to make assumptions about that stage of life. Like, for example, all of us can speak to childhood experiences because we were all children at one point, but it's all going to be, we all have different experiences, but we can usually connect on certain aspects here and there. But for those of us who aren't older adults, we tend to make assumptions based on, what we observe, or make assumptions on this is what we see in media, how aging is portrayed. And For example, most folks tend to think about older adults as, living in nursing homes. Well, no, that's only 4 to 5% of the older adult population. Where's the other 95%? They're working in your community. They're, volunteering, or they may be, at home feeling isolated. So it's really trying to gain that wider perspective and understanding. And those are the kind of books that helps kind of hone in to that.
Wow, I mean, this class itself sounds amazing. And you're teaching this at Ohio University?
Yes, yes.
Wow. Oh, is it auditable? Virtual and audible?
The course that looks more at the family aspects of aging and caregiving, that has been available virtually for students. I may go back to it being in person. It kind of started with pandemic, where everything went virtual. But my Business of Aging course, it is in person, but there's a graduate section that we have available that can be taken remotely. But even if a person just ever wanted to connect with me just to talk about some of the ideas or concepts that I discuss in those courses, I absolutely welcome it, because as you can tell, I just get excited talking to anybody about these topics.
Yes, definitely. I can tell you're passionate and very well researched and experienced. We are so grateful to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. This was a lot of fun. And the time just, I'm like, how has it been 30 minutes? I can go on for another 2 hours, but
I
that's the
know.
educator in me.
We're gonna have to call later, Julie, because I have more questions.
Sure.
Even what we covered today was amazing. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.